I'll now call on Claes. Are you ready, Claes?
Absolutely.
Claes Berglund is a ship owning. He's going to speak on ship owner global strategy for environmental shipping. Claes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is how I look. Now I'll sit down because this is I do it for the paper. So I come from a shipping company, Stena. We operate some 170 vessels around the world. Ferries in Europe, but also tankers, and we're also involved in offshore drilling and other type of marine activities. I think I had one slide or so, but I think we can manage without it actually. So if you can't find it, that's fine. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to briefly then discuss a ship owner's perspective or global strategy for environmental shipping. So I try to make my voice represent the shipping industry, although I have a certain interest, of course, in the Nordic countries where we come from, and we have most of our operation. So, ladies and gentlemen, all through history and the development of mankind, shipping has played a central role. We all know that. It is one of the oldest businesses in the world, and the oceans unite people and enable trade. And it is actually a fantastic resource, and it's a resource that we have to take care of. And I think that's a bit of what this seminar is all about. Shipping is also an important enabler of world trade, and thereby means increased distribution of wealth. We have employees from all over the world, and it's truly a global business, and we are proud to be part of it. It is also the safest and most environmentally friendly mode of transport. Now, the European shipping sector is 40% of world shipping. So when we talk about European shipping, we talk about actually world shipping and not only European shipping. So, because this 40% is of course much more than the trade we represent. We should be proud of the fact that European ships are trading on all oceans, serving many markets. Through a well-functioning system of ports and operators, European shipping is also a central part of the intra-European transport system. A ferry sailing between Civitavecchia and Barcelona is as much an infrastructure as a tunnel under the river Elbe. So the shipping industry, we operate some 80,000 ships around the globe. The International Maritime Organization, the UN body, IMO, that was just mentioned here before, is the governing body over this industry. And I must say, it's a fantastic institution. States, together with the industry, work side by side to improve shipping as a whole, especially when it comes to safety and environment. The soon-to-arrive Balanced Water Convention, which addresses the serious problem with invasive species, is one example of an important work from IMO, and there are many more. It is also worth noting that the shipping industry is the only industry with a global regulation for CO2 emissions. It regulates what type of ships you are allowed to build, and requires that all ships have an energy efficiency plan. I would like to say that IMO is a very well-functioning body for our industry, and I dare even to say that it's among the different UN organizations, it's today the absolutely best one, and the one that actually works. We should refrain from local or regional regulations and focus our efforts on IMO when it comes to developing our industry. But, coming back to European shipping then, the strong European shipping community, that also comes with a responsibility, of course. Who, if not we, should be the forerunners of making shipping a more sustainable and less harmful for the environment? So, and that's actually why we're here today, isn't it? And we have some challenges, and you know these, perhaps, but I mentioned them anyway. We need to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. We need to further reduce the emission of sulfur, nitrogen, and particles to air. We need to reduce harmful emissions to the water. And we need to reduce noise, both to actually in air, in where we operate, but also in noise into the water. And we need to increase safety, both for humans and the environment. So that's the 5 different priorities, I think, that we should look on. So there are many areas where solutions may be found. And these challenges, and I want to name the most important ones, and particularly just mentioned a few actually. So some of them we are in full agreement here. So today most ships run on fuel oil, on fossil fuel oil. Fuel oil is not sustainable, and we are looking very hard to find other options, preferably non-fossil alternatives, which lead into the first area of important development for a more environmentally friendly shipping industry. Natural gas is a comparably clean, but still fossil fuel. It is also quite cheap. The problem is that it's very hard to transport. Unless you are close to a pipeline, then it's very easy to transport. So this problem can be solved in different ways. One alternative is to lowering the temperature of the gas to minus 163 degrees, which makes the gas a liquid and 600 times smaller. This is what we call liquefied natural gas, and it's an increasingly popular fuel also for shipping. A second alternative is to convert natural gas to methanol at the source. Then it becomes a normal flammable liquid. It is actually possible to produce methanol from many different sources, for example, forest products or waste. It is even possible to make methanol from CO2 and water. That's what we have been as a company looking at methanol. I think there was a brochure here in the room about that if you're interested in it, with a good help from EU. So we are looking very closely at these different options as they develop and are being used by more and more operators. Currently in the Stena fleet, we operate, as I said, 173 vessels, out of which 169 are using fuel oil, 1 methanol, and 3 LNG. And those 3 are LNG tankers, so they're actually also carrying LNG around the globe. So the second area of development for environmental shipping is electricity. New types of efficient batteries and the low cost of electricity is a very promising development that will change the shipping industry. Already today, there are 100% electric ferries in Norway, and we believe that we are in the beginning of a very interesting evolution in the electricity area when it comes to shipping. With fast charging techniques or battery switch techniques, short sea shipping has the potential to use electricity as its main source of propulsion energy. For longer routes, hybrids may be a good alternative. This exciting area needs more research, more funding, and brave forerunners. A third area is new materials when building ships. We changed from wood to steel some 100 years ago. You all know that. It's probably time to change again. New, lighter, but still strong materials at competitive costs will reduce the need for fuel and hopefully also reduce the construction cost. So new materials are very interesting. It's a very interesting area. A fourth area is to continue the development of hydrodynamics. Although the Vikings got it pretty right with a hull form some 1,000 years ago, and John Ericsson with the propeller in 1839, we still see potential for a substantial improvement in this area of hydrodynamics. And finally, the fifth area for more environmentally friendly shipping is to use the potential of digitalization. This can improve everything from how we design and construct vessels to how we operate them. In short, to utilize our resources better with improved loading, optimized routing, and communication with other parties. Why should we run at full speed to a port just to be told to wait? In addition to reducing the use of energy, digitalization can also play an important role in increasing safety. To sum this up, if you want to be a shipping company for the future, like we want, you have to actually take part in shaping this future. Going forward, we will see and be part of an exciting development in these areas: alternative fuels, electricity, new materials, hydrodynamics, and finally, digitalization. Shipping is developing with society and will continue to do so on a global scale, and contribute to a sustainable world, hopefully. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Claes. Any questions now to Claes?
Brian, if you allow me.
Yes.
It's not a question, it's more to stress.
You can
One of them.
follow them and give Claes.
Thank you. It's just to stress what Mr. Berglund has said, because as a regulator in Portugal, regulator of the activity, for the modes of transport activity, in this case the maritime activity, I want to stress what you have said, and just to address to the people of the Commission that it's here, that the regulators must look at the global activity, the shipping. And so IMO is a great role to play here, and we cannot have measures at regional, just at regional area, but at global area. Once, of course, the change of climate, it's an issue that everybody is talking. Anyway, shipping is a global activity, as we all know. And so we cannot have an imbalance between European ship owners and other ship owners. This is very important, as and we regulators must look at that and must stress and must call attention to all intervenants that there must not be an imbalance between European ship owners and the other ones. So just to call it, it's not a question, but just to state what we have said. Thank you.
Thank you. If I just can fill in that, we are, as a ship owners, we are actually very proud of IMO. One might not believe that because it's a regulatory body and we don't want more regulations. Yes, but if they are on a global scale, they actually develop our industry in a very good way. And it's also, in IMO, we are welcome to contribute with our views. It's a very open forum, and we really like that. So I think it is a good process, sometimes a bit too slow, but that comes with the international negotiations. I know that's what happens.
I will describe the IMO as the world's slowest moving body, but I'm glad to say that it's improved somewhat since then. But I think it's a very important point that's made here, which is we should do things at IMO level, not necessarily just EU level. You know, I'm now thinking of a sector in the Mediterranean, for example. You know, and I know some elected members are there on a certain committee that I once dubbed the Taliban, that they'll be looking at, well, why don't we do this, why don't we do that? But there is a global link to maritime that has to be taken into account when you're doing these so-called good deeds. And we got in terrible trouble with ETS in aviation. It's still not perfect. You know, they've got reviewing that now and so forth, and I know that there'll be a battle in that. And I remember very vividly in the Transport Committee, there was a battle between the Transport Committee, who had to implement ETS, and the Environment Committee, who were, you know, boldly going where no man has gone before, in the words of Star Trek, you know. So we have to get that balance, yeah. Anyway, before I get myself in real hot water, is there any more questions? Yes, sir.
Again, from SESMA. Maybe I get myself a little bit in problems, but I want to ask the question anyway. Don't you think, sir, that the IMO is a bit too political, and that IMO should listen more to the working floor, what's really happening in the maritime world? Thank you.
as Mr. Simpson just said, it's not a perfect institution, but I think it's a very good one, and we are all part of the IMO actually. We can change it ourselves, the industry, the people who are there, the politicians and so on, so it's up to us to change it. I can agree with you to some extent, but that can also be improved, but the whole picture of IMO is that it's a very good institution, it works well. That's at least my view.
My experience of IMO as a seafarer was it was totally controlled by the ship owners. And you know that, and I know it, right? And one good example of getting a global solution to this is that the voting power is dependent on where the tonnage is registered. And that used to be Liberia and countries like that, which I call the flag of convenience. And they stopped a lot of improvements. I think it's changed since then. And again, I think IMO is the only body that you can, is a UN body that can bring these parts together, and the ship owners themselves have confidence in it. So do many of the seafaring unions. It is an avenue where there's common agreement. Could I ask though, the point you made which struck me as well, and you see in many ports that the port, you get the ship there faster, more efficient, and then they're stuck outside the port. You go to any of the Eastern Europe or the American ports now coming in from China, and you can be waiting weeks there, presumably pumping out the gases as well in those circumstances. Is there any work that you're aware of about improving port systems? And secondly, the maritime regions that we were talking about, the Humber and my colleague there, is there are very small ports as well as big ports. And sometimes the big ports, to their advantage, like the ships outside to a certain extent, it's the trade, it's coming there. But there are a lot of smaller ports that could contribute in a maritime strategy to improving this port delay problem. Do you have experience of that?
No, this area has a huge potential, and that is, and Mr. Kyttel also mentioned it, to look at the vessels as a system rather than individual vessels as such. Look at it as a whole system and integrate the information between those. And there is a project around this. It's called Mona Lisa, or it was called Mona Lisa. Now it's called something else. I would say that that's a good example of taking steps in that direction to connect the ships and the ports to each other, so everybody knows where the ships are going, when they're arriving, what speed they're taking, which route they're taking, why they do it, and also interlink that information to the port. So that is actually an EU project which is making good headwinds, I would say.
And part of the monitoring strategy.
Yes.
Can I just say, before the thing, just to recall that we have 2 or 3 projects already developed in Motors of the Sea, where we try to integrate all the information so that a ship may reach just in time, not before, not after, just in time, but that information is spread throughout the logistic chain, and it's interconnected with railways, with road information, with port. We are trying to do these, and those are open platforms. So the more, the merrier. So you're more than welcome to join.
There was a question in the middle there somewhere. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Ian Timpson. I'm from the UK Department for Transport. First of all, thank you very much, Claes, for your presentation. I thought that was very interesting. You mentioned that Stena, you mentioned that your fleet, that most of the fleet is still using fuel oil, 1 or 2 vessels using methanol, LNG. That the ideal is that we should move away from using fossil fuels in the future. I was just wondering, what are the main drivers which will help ship owners or encourage ship owners to move to sort of greener fuels? As we know at the moment, fossil fuel, liquid fuel is actually relatively cheap, and I suppose my concern is that there's not a great deal of perhaps financial incentive for ship owners to actually look at these alternative technologies at the moment. I was just wondering what it is from a ship owner's point of view that we, the regulators, could be doing to encourage you to choose the more environmentally favourable option. Thank you.
As regulators, you have 2 options. It's the carrot or it's the stick. And obviously, from my point of view, I would prefer the carrot. So support, encourage ship owners who wants to move ahead of the others, help them to do that, find ways of helping the suppliers of the innovation, the new technologies that we need on board. So it's rational for us to buy an SCR to get to reduce NOx, for example. Today it's not. I mean, we are running ships today. We have catalytic converters on board those vessels to reduce the NOx, but we're not using them because we have no incentive to do that. In some areas they've been very ahead and give us different financial incentives to use these type of instruments. And of course that's good if that can be achieved more. Another example, the ballast water that we talked about a little bit. We have installed ballast water treatment systems on our vessels. So I asked one of the chief engineers, so how do they work? And he looked at me and said, how would I know? Well, aren't you using them? No, why should I? And it's a very good answer actually, because that's our world. We need to have incentives to use the equipment, and this is a huge problem for Wärtsilä and their colleagues, because we buy the system but we don't use them because we don't need to. And that's hindering development in some way. So, and the answer is not to regulate, because then you go from 0 to 100 directly. The answer is something in between, and that is called incentives, or the carrots. That will stimulate ship owners to act before the market, do some marketing on it, get other benefits, and in cooperation with the manufacturers, we can develop these new technologies and instruments and so on. So, and I think that's a little bit what we're talking about today, actually. How can European shipping move ahead of the rest of the shipping industry and get a competitive advantage doing that?
At the back there.
Yes, thank you. I'm Panagiotis Aferiudakis from Ocean Finance. Let me give you some facts from the shipping in the south. Only in Greece we have around 1,300 vessels that will be affected by the new regulations. And the fact is that the average age of these vessels are more than 25 years old. So nobody expects that these ship owners are going to invest on those vessels because there is no adequate lifespan in order to have a payback period. So the ship owners are in a very difficult situation right now in the south. I believe that the same applies also in the north, and we are working very closely with the Zero Vision tool in order to find a solution for that. And this is very critical for countries like Greece, with an archipelagic nature, and also for countries like Cyprus, peripheral zones or ultra-peripheral zones like Madeira or Azores. So shipping is very vital in order for not to do something. For that reason, we have, together with the Shipowners Association and the Coastal Shipowners Association of Greece, and also from Cyprus and Bulgaria, we have invented, let's say, a plan in order to make feasible a renewal plan for these shipowners. The plan is the Europa Sea Plan, and we aim by gathering all the needs of these shipowners to a massive shipbuilding plan in order to reduce the shipbuilding costs. So we think that by using all the European incentives from the Juncker plan or from grants or other sources, it might be feasible to cope with this new regulation. But the only way for this is to come with a renewal plan for the vessels, especially for the countries of the south.
Paul Kibero from the Grimaldi Group. I'm glad to hear from Mr. Zaharidakis that he raised the issue of a renewal plan of the fleet. Now the question is, today we are talking about fuel, and fuel is the cost of oil has gone down to 1/3 of what it was about 2 years ago. So now it should be the time to make investments, and not all ship owners are doing that, because now you know that more than 50% of our costs used to be fuel. Now that this cost has gone down, now it's the opportunity to make investments. But not everybody is doing that. Also because some ship owners had a lot of debt, had a lot of bad results in the last few years, so now they have to cover what they, all these losses of the previous years. The question is, if we want to renew our fleet, and especially in the south, maybe, and this is what we also proposed a few years ago, maybe we should forbid the navigation or the entrance of vessels which are, you mentioned Greece, you have ships in Greece which are over 40 years old. So the question is, when we talk about environment and we have ships which are 40 years old or 30 years old, are they performing the same like a vessel which is 2 or 3 or 5 years old? Is it the same? So this is the question. So if we want to go back to what, and I remember I participated at your at the conference we had in Athens about your proposal. It's a very nice, although there are some issues which need to be clarified about standardization of ships, and which is not very, let's say, it's not an easy issue because ship owners are used to decide by themselves what type of vessel they want to have. But it's an idea. The question is, are we still willing to have very old ships navigating in EU waters? This is the question. And that could be also a way of trying to push for a renewal of fleet. Because a renewal of fleet means having more environmentally friendly ships. Definitely, the technology of today is not the one we had 30 or 40 years ago. And then we can also give a hand to our shipyards. Because when we talk about, for example, the motorways of the sea, we also mean RoPax vessels. And we know that Europe is, let's say, the driving force behind this type of, I mean, let's say it's the best practice, the best vessels in that respect are built in Europe. So that's another issue that maybe we have to think about it when we talk about regulation.
Is there anybody else? Anybody else want to ask a question or make a point?
Thank you. My name is Serigos Andreas, ex-commandant of the Hellenic Coast Guard, representative of the Hellenic Ship Owners Association. I would like to thank you for the invitation and the initiative to collect all the people there, to gather all the people here, and to discuss this very important and very serious issue. After the previous speakers, I would like to notice that in nowadays there are two elements: the low prices of oil and the low prices of the freight. Of course, these two factors are very positive, perhaps in the future period, in order to renew our ship buildings and renew our vessels as well. As concerns our association has under its umbrella about 1,300 vessels, and the majority of them, as Mr. Zachariadakis mentioned a little bit before, are in age of some age 25 years old, perhaps more. That you understand that and the states are in favor and are in favor in promoting the plan, Europa Sea Plan. And at the states, the Hellenic Association Society makes all the initiatives in order to gather from a pool of ship owners, second, to formulate technical characteristics for these specific vessels, and third, to create ways in order to proceed in the shipyards. I think that the standardization of the characteristics of these vessels, and perhaps a majority of group for some categories of these vessels, perhaps makes the scale of the economy scale more productive. And finishing, I would like to mention that in IMO always take some decisions in international way, in a global way. That means that there are discussions for international fora and international shipping. Furthermore, in the regional area, as Europe, of course, some other decisions have been taken. Therefore, the different species are major, and therefore we must look forward to see in which way we can proceed these specifications. We thank you very much, and I hope in the next step to take some more clear answers on the specific issues. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
It's me again. One thing, we listen to shipmasters, we represent them also, but we also listen to ship owners. We represent the good captains and the good owners. What surprises a lot of owners is that the transition period in the new SICA went so fast. Why were the ship owners not given some more time to adapt to the new rules? This has given a big impact on a lot of companies, also in the profit figures. Thank you.
Well, I must say that was IMO. That was the states in IMO. There was a lot came knocking at my door, having agreed the SECA terms of reference, and then they found, oh my God, you know, it was too quick, and they were asking for extra time. Now, I will say that had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the EU. That was the IMO. That was the IMO's decision, and we had to, the Baltic states in particular had to bite the bullet and get on with it, so to speak. But I do think that by having to bite the bullet and get on with it, that put them in a better position, now, because they've actually started to develop the alternative fuels, the LNGs, the methanol and so on, that they would not necessarily have developed at such a pace had the SECA not been so quickly implemented. So I firmly say the SECA was IMO, not EU, but we were with it. Now, what I'm saying is that we have to be careful if the IMO wants to extend a SECA and include the Mediterranean, then that's up to the states around the Mediterranean. That includes non-EU as well as EU countries. All I am saying is be wary of a certain committee in the Parliament who want it done tomorrow and sob the consequences. That's all I'm putting up that warning. Is there any more? Yeah. John?
I've been 40 years involved in the legislative framework in one form or other in the maritime industry. The arguments I've heard today are quite common. Namely, will you invest in the shipping and get on with it? And some of the companies which are good or bad will get on it. Many of the others just want to know about the profit and the ship concerned with that. So at the end of the day, it's a balance, as Brian is saying, about what that should be for agreeing globally. And what you're deciding here is what is the best sense for that. So clearly, you want the ship owner's position to be seen. But sometimes ship owners don't quite see it that way, and if you're wanting a global solution, some ships are up to your standards and some are not, and then the next argument becomes competition about we're paying more for this crew or that crew. It's not unknown.
Yeah. Or implementation, you know.
Or the implementation. Yeah. So these are important issues. But I do recall that when I first introduced the Climate Change Act, we made it statutory in the UK after Kyoto. The industry came to us and said, well, we don't think you should be making these reductions in emissions from the big energy users. And we said, well, we're going to do that, but what we will do, we will allow you then, as an industry, we will give you a target for all of you. Those that meet the target that you agree will then not have to pay a levy, a climate change levy. Those that don't will have to pay it. And I can recall Tony Blair ringing me and saying, we're going to introduce a climate change levy. Oh, I said, you mean an energy tax? No, we don't talk of tax. But it meant that that levy was an incentive, which is just being talked about now, for the good to get ahead. And if you want money to help, it's not to give some of these ship owners money for the old clapped out ships, because that's what we're talking about, right? And basically, what you're doing here is actually giving money to try experiments of the use of different fuels and different ships. Now that's a way to do it, to show that it's both profitable to do it. In the industry, I have to say, on the ones I'm talking about, on energy, they found, when forced to do it, that it was more efficient because they used energy more efficiently instead of just taking it as a common cost. So they actually benefited, most of them, and made more profit, simply because they were forced to say, well, if it's going to come in one form or another, let's get ahead and see how we can use it effectively. And that's the challenge for us. To get the balance and the cooperation of the shipping industry is critical. But sometimes, unless those who don't care a damn about what you're trying to do in getting a decent framework, they undermine it. And the only way we went forward then, basically, and you're doing it now, certain ships can't come into certain areas. This is a emission control area. It's beginning to happen everywhere. And the shipbuilder wants to know what is its kind of ship and what energy and what fuel will satisfy that. So it is a combination of some form of framework agreed, which is for the best. It's how and what is the best, rather than trying to deal with a few are only interested in making a few bob.
All right. Yeah. Now, last one.
Okay.
Because I've got to get Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. So I am Patrick Envoy. I work for the peripheral maritime regions, 150 regions. And I would like to follow up what Claudia Montero de Agua said about how motorways of the sea could better cover outermost and island regions. And I wonder whether there could be an EU strategy to cover these specific territories, in particular, and it is linked with the theme today of environment, in particular in LNG facilities, both defensive but also an offensive and forward-looking strategy in using these outermost regions as sort of hubs and bridges between other continents and Europe for LNG issues. Thank you.